"This isn't your kind of store," Ethan White barked, voice echoing off polished wood and marble floors, sharp enough to slice through the quiet hum of the luxury furniture showroom. Jasmine Carter paused mid-step, her sneakers quiet against the sleek tile, black cashmere sweater and fitted jeans blending seamlessly with the understated elegance of the space, her hands loosely holding a slim leather portfolio, her gaze calm, eyes scanning the showroom with a measured patience that contrasted the spike of tension Ethan tried to manufacture. Customers froze mid-glance at glass display tables, silk-upholstered chairs, and bespoke shelving, their breaths held as if waiting for the next move in a slow-motion chess game unfolding right in front of them. Ethan's smirk widened as he gestured dismissively, assuming authority, calling out for a staff member to handle this visitor, while Jasmine's lips barely moved, her calm aura thickening the air, radiating a confidence rooted in decades of experience navigating spaces where she was underestimated, overlooked, and underestimated again. She remembered every slight from years past, the cold stares when she entered other showrooms, the assumptions about her ability, her worth, every no she had ever received turning inward to a steady flame of focus, now concentrated fully in this showroom, this moment. A young clerk hesitated near the entrance, phone in hand, unsure whether to step forward or back, curiosity and anxiety written across his face, while other customers whispered softly, cameras raised, capturing the tension like a silent jury witnessing a trial unfold. Jasmine moved deliberately, each step measured, the leather strap of her portfolio brushing lightly against her side, an almost imperceptible sound that somehow commanded attention, drawing the eyes of both patrons and staff. Ethan, sensing an opening to assert dominance, leaned slightly toward her, voice tinged with condescension. "You must be mistaken about the price range here," he said, scanning her portfolio as if it could betray her, not realizing the calm composure in her posture was an unspoken challenge, a quiet assertion that she was no ordinary client. The air thickened as Jasmine stopped in front of a display of handcrafted walnut dining sets, her fingers resting briefly on the smooth surface, her gaze shifting to meet Ethan's for the first time, slow and deliberate, a moment that seemed to suspend reality in the showroom, a clash of assumption versus authority. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, whispers trailing behind them, while a few onlookers raised their phones subtly, sensing the unfolding drama and the weight of Jasmine's presence. She didn't speak, but her eyes, steady and piercing, carried a message sharper than any word, measured power, calm dominance, and an unshakable awareness of her worth. As the tension mounted, a clerk whispered to another, "Is she really who she says she is?" Jasmine tilted her head slightly, the hint of a smile touching her lips, subtle but deliberate, signaling that this confrontation was far from over and that the next minutes would reveal something far greater than anyone in the showroom expected, a turn of events that would shift the balance of authority entirely, leaving viewers suspended on the precipice of revelation, waiting to see how underestimated power finally claimed its space. Jasmine Carter did not flinch as Ethan White stepped closer, his voice growing sharper with each word, questioning her presence in the showroom. "Are you sure you are allowed to be here?" he said, scanning the black portfolio in her hands as if it could reveal her status. She remained calm, her posture straight, every movement deliberate, radiating a quiet authority that drew the attention of every customer and employee in the room. The soft hum of conversation ceased as onlookers noticed the subtle tension, their eyes darting between Jasmine and Ethan, trying to understand the invisible balance of power shifting in front of them. A young sales associate, uncertain and hesitant, whispered under his breath to another, "Something does not feel right here," while subtly reaching for his phone to capture the moment. Jasmine's eyes met his for a brief second, a silent acknowledgement that he could observe but not intervene, that patience and precision were part of the unfolding strategy. She moved slowly toward a central display, her hand brushing lightly against the polished surface of a mahogany coffee table, the texture warm beneath her fingertips, her gaze steady, unyielding. Ethan, frustrated by the lack of response, raised his voice, attempting to assert control over the situation, gesturing to other employees and speaking in clipped tones. "Handle this situation now. Do not let her disturb our clients. Customers shifted uneasily in their seats, a few murmuring softly as phones lifted, capturing the scene from angles that would later reveal the rising tension and the subtle dominance Jasmine carried without uttering a single loud word. Jasmine's mind traced back to earlier experiences, moments when she had been dismissed or underestimated, memories of doors closed and opportunities denied, each recollection fueling the calm intensity in her chest. She remembered a small boutique in Chicago where her questions were ignored, a high-end showroom in New York where a clerk had assumed she could not afford even the simplest item, and the countless times her credentials had been questioned solely because of appearances. That collection of past encounters had shaped her, refining her sense of timing, of when to speak and when to let actions convey authority. As she approached the center of the showroom, the polished floors reflected the overhead lighting, highlighting the contrast between her composed figure and the flustered demeanor of Ethan, whose smirk had begun to falter under the silent weight of Jasmine's presence. The staff and customers felt the shift before it was verbalized, a subtle, almost imperceptible aura of command that made questions linger on lips and actions hesitate. Jasmine stopped, placing her portfolio gently on a display shelf, and raised her head, eyes locking with Ethan's, unblinking, her calm intensity filling the space as though the walls themselves recognized her authority. The air seemed to thicken, charged with anticipation, each breath measured, the showroom suspended in a collective moment of suspense. She tilted her chin slightly, a gesture almost lost among the luxury furnishings yet undeniable in its impact, signaling to the assistant nearby that the next phase of their plan was ready to be activated, that observation had been noted, and that patience was about to be transformed into undeniable assertion of control, leaving every person present aware that the situation was far from over, that Jasmine's quiet power was about to redefine the room, one deliberate, measured step at a time. Jasmine Carter remained motionless for a heartbeat, allowing the rising murmur of customers and employees to swell into a tangible tension that filled every corner of the showroom, the polished surfaces reflecting not just the luxury furnishings but the quiet authority she radiated. Ethan White, sensing the subtle shift in energy, straightened and attempted to regain control, gesturing sharply toward the staff, his words clipped and deliberate. Do your jobs. Make sure she does not disrupt any more customers. Yet each syllable fell flat against the unwavering composure of Jasmine, whose steady gaze seemed to anchor the room itself. A few customers exchanged glances, the subtle rise and fall of whispers capturing the collective curiosity and disbelief as they observed the scene unfold in real time, some instinctively reaching for phones to record, others simply leaning forward, drawn into the unfolding drama. Jasmine's mind traced the pattern of assumptions, the repeated judgments, and the quiet dismissals she had endured over decades, translating each memory into a disciplined resolve that allowed her to maintain control in the present moment. The young sales associate shifted uneasily, caught between the explicit commands of Ethan and the undeniable presence of Jasmine, his hand hovering over his phone, the decision to act frozen by the gravity of what he perceived. Jasmine's lips parted slightly, almost imperceptibly, as her voice remained internal, a silent articulation of strategy, the kind that had guided her through countless boardroom confrontations, acquisitions, and negotiations, now applied with precision to this confined space where her authority was under untested scrutiny. Ethan, frustrated by the lack of visible compliance, stepped closer, the firmness in his posture meant to intimidate, yet betraying uncertainty, as the room responded subtly to Jasmine's calm dominance, a collective understanding that power did not always announce itself with volume, but with measured presence and undeniable consequence. Customers watched, captivated by the contrast, the luxury furniture now serving as a backdrop to a live demonstration of composed influence, each gesture and pause of Jasmine's calculated movements reinforcing the silent assertion of her authority. A clerk, still hesitant, murmured under her breath to another, "She handles this with a confidence I have not seen before," while Jasmine's eyes swept across the showroom, meeting the gaze of staff and patrons alike, establishing an unspoken boundary that challenged assumptions and demanded recognition. The polished wood beneath her fingertips and the cool glass surfaces of the display cases seemed to amplify her measured steps, each movement deliberate, a visual punctuation in the story of underestimated power finally poised to assert itself. Jasmine's assistant, standing discreetly near the back, received a subtle signal and began executing a series of confirmations and verifications, the systems and protocols cascading in support of the authority Jasmine embodied, preparing the moment when observation and verification would converge. Ethan's smirk faltered further, the air thick with anticipation as the staff began to sense that the invisible balance of power had shifted, that their preconceived notions were being quietly dismantled, and that the next moments would unfold a revelation that the showroom, the employees, and the customers would witness, a demonstration of measured, undeniable control poised to redefine the space entirely. Jasmine Carter's hand remained lightly resting on the edge of a polished oak display, her eyes scanning the showroom with precision, noting every subtle movement, every glance exchanged between Ethan White and his staff, the tension in their posture growing with each passing second. Customers shifted uneasily, some whispering softly, others discreetly raising their phones to capture the unfolding scene, the soft hum of the air conditioning and the reflective gleam of glass and metal amplifying the silent drama that filled the space. Jasmine's mind replayed decades of experience, the repeated patterns of dismissal and prejudice she had faced, each memory now sharpened into clarity, giving her an unspoken command over the room that was more compelling than any raised voice could be. Ethan, attempting to assert his authority, gestured toward the employees, his voice tense and clipped. "Ensure she does not interfere with the displays or disturb our clients." Yet his words carried no weight against the quiet, deliberate presence of Jasmine, whose calm aura seemed to fill the space and anchor the attention of everyone present. A junior associate near the entrance hesitated, hand poised over a phone, unsure whether to document the moment or step back, the choice frozen as Jasmine's gaze briefly met his, silently communicating that observation was permitted, intervention unnecessary, that patience and precision were guiding the unfolding confrontation. Jasmine took a slow, measured step toward a central display of handcrafted dining chairs, her fingers brushing lightly over the smooth leather, the subtle contact emphasizing both elegance and authority, drawing the eyes of staff and customers alike, a physical punctuation in the narrative of understated dominance she embodied. Ethan's frustration became palpable, his movements slightly sharper, his posture more rigid as he tried to reclaim control, yet the staff and onlookers were increasingly attuned to the undeniable calm in Jasmine's demeanor, the quiet intensity that suggested power measured and deliberate rather than performative or reactive. She allowed the room to absorb her presence, letting the weight of expectation and observation amplify the pressure on Ethan, the subtle collective attention of patrons and staff reinforcing the shift in authority. Jasmine's assistant, positioned discreetly near the rear of the showroom, responded to her silent cue, initiating verification processes and confirming ownership, the subtle signals cascading to reinforce the quiet assertion of control. Jasmine was establishing a network of confirmation that would soon make the balance of power indisputable. Each step she took was deliberate, each pause calculated, her presence asserting itself in the polished showroom with the same force as the gleaming furniture around her. While Ethan's smirk began to waver, the subtle cues of unease visible in the tightening of his jaw and the slight flick of his eyes toward his assistant, the staff sensing that their assumptions had been quietly dismantled, and the customers, caught between curiosity and anticipation, leaned forward, the showroom suspended in a collective anticipation, waiting for the next move that would shift the unfolding story into a decisive and unmistakable assertion of authority. Jasmine Carter shifted her weight slightly, the soft click of her shoes against the polished tile resonating through the showroom, as if marking a silent drumbeat of control. Ethan White, sensing the subtle shift in energy, tried once more to assert his presence, gesturing toward the staff and raising his voice. "Ensure she does not disturb any of our clients or displays." Yet his commands carried little weight against the composed aura that Jasmine projected. Customers, previously hesitant, leaned forward with curiosity, some lifting their phones to capture the moment, others simply holding their breath, captivated by the tension that seemed to pulse in the air. Jasmine's eyes swept across the room, noting each glance, each minor gesture, absorbing the quiet commentary of the onlookers and the subtle unease of the staff, transforming observation into an invisible web of influence that tethered the room to her presence. She recalled the countless times she had been underestimated, dismissed, and overlooked, each memory sharpening her focus, turning previous frustration into strategic patience. A junior employee fidgeted near the entrance, his hand hovering over a smartphone, torn between documenting the scene and stepping back, uncertain how to navigate the silent assertion of authority that Jasmine emanated. She moved deliberately toward a central display of leather armchairs, her fingers tracing the smooth contours lightly, her gestures graceful yet commanding, every motion reinforcing the quiet dominance that had begun to permeate the showroom. Ethan's frustration became more apparent, his jaw tightening and his eyes flicking toward his assistant for reassurance, a subtle recognition that the balance of power was no longer in his favor. Jasmine's assistant, positioned discreetly near the back, received a small signal and began executing verification protocols, the subtle activation of systems ensuring that every facet of authority aligned with Jasmine's presence, confirming her ownership and control in ways that were visible yet understated. The murmurs among customers and staff grew, whispers of disbelief mixing with awe as they sensed the impending revelation, a slow recognition of influence that did not need volume or confrontation to be acknowledged. Jasmine's gaze met Ethan's briefly, steady and unyielding, conveying more in a single glance than any words could achieve, a reminder that authority can be quiet, measured, and absolute. Every step she took across the showroom, each measured pause and subtle gesture, reinforced the narrative of calm mastery, creating an atmosphere where expectation, attention, and recognition converged around her. The room held its collective breath, sensing that the next moments would not just challenge assumptions but redefine the space entirely, that observation would soon meet undeniable confirmation, and that the quiet yet unwavering command Jasmine carried would transform anticipation into a tangible, inescapable presence, leaving every person present aware that the unfolding events were a demonstration of deliberate power and poised resolution, and that the crescendo of influence was approaching. Its inevitable, compelling peak. Jasmine Carter took a measured breath, the subtle sound barely perceptible yet resonant enough to command attention in the showroom, her gaze sweeping across the polished surfaces and carefully arranged furniture, noting the slight shifts in posture and expression among the staff and customers alike. Ethan White, increasingly aware that his earlier attempts to assert control had failed, adjusted his stance, voice taut with a forced confidence. "This situation is under control. Please continue your browsing." Yet the words lacked authority, dissolving in the presence of Jasmine's composed dominance. Customers exchanged glances, some leaning forward to capture the unfolding scene on their phones, others simply observing, captivated by the interplay of quiet power and restrained tension that seemed to pulse through the room. Jasmine's assistant, attentive and precise, initiated the next sequence of verification checks, confirming ownership and authority through a network of secure systems, the soft notifications and confirmations blending seamlessly into the rhythm of the showroom without drawing attention to the operational mechanics behind the control Jasmine wielded. She stepped closer to a central display of hand-finished mahogany tables, her fingers lightly tracing the grain of the wood, the deliberate motion reinforcing the unspoken message of ownership and measured power, drawing the eyes of onlookers while simultaneously establishing a visual and psychological boundary within the space. Ethan, increasingly unsettled, attempted a subtle maneuver to regain composure, glancing towards senior staff for affirmation, yet the subtle sway of uncertainty in their expressions betrayed the growing realization that authority in this room was no longer aligned with his assumptions. Jasmine allowed the tension to mount, each pause calibrated, her eyes flicking from one end of the showroom to the other, observing, evaluating, asserting control through presence alone. The hum of conversation and the faint click of a camera shutter punctuated the moment, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation, a silent acknowledgement among all present that something decisive was approaching. Jasmine's mind traced prior experiences of being underestimated, dismissed, and misjudged, each memory contributing to the focused patience she now exercised, transforming past frustration into strategic leverage within the confined space. Her gaze met the eyes of a young clerk hesitating near the entrance, silently granting permission to witness without interference, reinforcing the unspoken rules of engagement she had established. The staff and customers felt the subtle but undeniable shift, the collective attention of the room bending toward Jasmine's quiet command, anticipation coalescing into a near-tangible force as the next moment of revelation drew near. Every measured step, each subtle gesture, every pause and glance created a narrative of calm authority, the polished showroom and its meticulously curated displays serving as both backdrop and amplifier to the unfolding assertion of influence, leaving the staff, customers, and even Ethan White suspended in awareness of the change in power. The room poised on the edge of an impending transformation that would leave no doubt as to who truly commanded presence and authority within the space. Jasmine Carter took a deliberate step closer to the central display, her posture unwavering, as the tension in the showroom thickened into a tangible presence that seemed to slow time itself. Ethan White, sensing the growing shift in authority, straightened and attempted to regain composure, gesturing sharply toward his staff and speaking in clipped, forced tones, yet his words felt hollow, dissipating against the measured confidence Jasmine radiated. Customers leaned forward, some instinctively lifting their phones to record, others simply watching, caught in the gravity of the silent power struggle unfolding before them. Jasmine's eyes moved across the room, taking in every subtle reaction, each small gesture, the slight hesitation in the staff, the murmurs of onlookers, the brief glances between patrons, and the stiffening of Ethan's stance, all forming an intricate web of observation that she silently commanded. Her mind traced the familiar patterns of prejudice and dismissal from years past, each memory honing her focus, transforming past indignities into deliberate, patient authority that did not need to be announced to be felt. A junior associate near the entrance shifted nervously, hand hovering over a smartphone, unsure whether to document or retreat, the indecision frozen under Jasmine's unwavering gaze, which conveyed control without a single raised voice. Jasmine moved slowly toward a hand-finished walnut sideboard, her fingers brushing lightly over the surface, emphasizing both elegance and ownership, while Ethan's expression flickered, the first hint of doubt showing as he glanced toward his assistant, seeking affirmation that was no longer forthcoming. Customers exchanged whispered observations, their attention fully captured. The showroom itself transformed from a space of luxury furniture to a stage for quiet mastery, where Jasmine's calm, deliberate presence overpowered assumptions and expectations with subtle, inescapable authority. Jasmine allowed the moment to linger, each pause purposeful, each breath measured, the quiet rhythm of her movement conveying a message louder than any words Ethan could command. Her assistant, positioned at the rear, received a subtle signal and began activating verification protocols, the confirmation cascading silently yet visibly through the space, reinforcing the inevitability of Jasmine's control and ownership. The murmurs grew, the staff and customers sensing the impending revelation, a collective anticipation settling over the showroom, creating an atmosphere charged with recognition of the true power present. Jasmine's gaze met Ethan's once more, unblinking, her calm intensity conveying a clear, silent message. The balance of authority had shifted irrevocably, and the next moments would confirm what had been quietly established, leaving every person in the room acutely aware that the quiet assertion of control she wielded was both deliberate and absolute, transforming the space and the dynamic within it with an almost imperceptible yet undeniable force, setting the stage for the revelation that would soon follow. Jasmine Carter paused in the center of the showroom, the soft reflection of the overhead lights glinting off the polished surfaces around her, her gaze calm and unwavering as the weight of anticipation settled across the room. Ethan White, attempting one last assertion of authority, straightened his posture and spoke in clipped tones. "Please continue browsing without interference." But but his words were hollow, unanchored in the presence of Jasmine's composed dominance. Customers leaned forward, some lifting their phones. Discreetly, capturing each subtle movement, each quiet glance, each pause that carried the weight of unspoken command. Jasmine's eyes swept across the space, noting the almost imperceptible shifts of the staff, the nervous adjustments of patrons, and the subtle tightening of Ethan's jaw, each reaction reinforcing the silent control she had begun to exert. Memories flickered through her mind. Previous instances of dismissal, being underestimated, and moments when her presence had been questioned solely because of appearance, all coalescing into a calm, deliberate authority that needed no demonstration beyond the stillness and clarity of her actions. She moved deliberately toward a display of handcrafted oak cabinets, her fingers brushing lightly along the smooth surface, a gesture that conveyed ownership without a word, drawing the attention of all present and establishing a quiet boundary of authority. The staff exchanged hesitant glances, whispers rising but restrained, as if instinctively acknowledging the subtle shift in the dynamic. The customers sensing a quiet yet unmistakable tension building as the narrative of control unfolded. Jasmine's assistant, positioned discreetly in the rear, executed verification procedures, the soft alerts and confirmations weaving an invisible network of authority that complemented Jasmine's composed presence. Every step Jasmine took, each deliberate motion, each subtle pause, acted as a punctuation in the story of quiet mastery she was illustrating, amplifying the awareness among staff and patrons that assumptions and expectations were being reshaped in real time. Ethan's confidence wavered, a faint flicker of doubt passing over his expression as he realized that his attempts to assert dominance had lost momentum, the room now attuned to Jasmine's measured, undeniable presence. The murmurs among customers grew, curiosity and astonishment mingling as the tension reached a new pitch, the showroom itself feeling transformed, a stage where quiet authority and composed control reigned, unchallenged by volume or gesture. Jasmine's gaze lingered briefly on the far corner of the showroom, where a young clerk hesitated with a phone in hand, and with a subtle nod, she communicated permission to observe without interference, reinforcing the controlled, deliberate framework she had established. The atmosphere thickened with anticipation, every breath measured, every eye focused, as the room awaited the next sequence, the moment when observation, verification, and presence would converge to affirm the quiet yet undeniable assertion of Jasmine's authority, leaving all present aware that a significant, decisive shift was imminent and that the space itself was now aligned with the calm, precise control she had orchestrated. Jasmine Carter lifted her chin slightly, a small but deliberate gesture that seemed to anchor the entire showroom, drawing every eye toward her without a single word spoken. Ethan White's attempts to regain composure became increasingly futile as he gestured toward staff with a forced authority that no longer resonated, his instructions dissipating in the presence of Jasmine's unwavering calm. Customers leaned forward, their phones raised to capture each subtle glance and motion, the quiet hum of conversation replaced by a shared sense of anticipation and curiosity. Jasmine's eyes scanned the room, noting the almost imperceptible shifts in posture, the subtle nervousness of the employees, and the quickened breaths of patrons, all forming an invisible map of awareness that she silently controlled. Her mind revisited the countless instances of dismissal and underestimation she had endured, each one transformed into precise patience, the foundation for the composed dominance she now projected. A young clerk near the rear of the showroom hesitated with a phone in hand, uncertain whether to intervene or simply record, the tension held steady by Jasmine's steady gaze, which silently granted permission to observe without acting, reinforcing the unspoken hierarchy she had established. Jasmine moved slowly toward a central display of handcrafted walnut chairs, her fingers lightly tracing the smooth edges, a subtle assertion of presence and ownership that drew attention without requiring confrontation. Ethan's expression flickered with doubt as he recognized the quiet shift in influence, the staff now looking to Jasmine for cues while the room seemed to bend subtly toward her measured authority. The soft notifications and confirmations from Jasmine's assistant reinforced the invisible framework of control, each digital alert a quiet affirmation of ownership and strategic oversight, seamlessly supporting the assertion she embodied in physical presence. The murmurs of customers rose gently, a mixture of curiosity and admiration, as they sensed the inevitability of the unfolding revelation, the collective attention of the room amplifying the impact of each of Jasmine's measured gestures. Every step, every pause, every glance contributed to a narrative of deliberate mastery. The showroom transformed from a space of luxury furnishings into a stage where subtle authority and calm dominance reigned without contest. Jasmine's gaze returned to Ethan for a brief instant, unblinking and precise, communicating a clear message of control, the weight of her presence undeniable. The staff and patrons, caught in the current of anticipation, felt the space itself align with the quiet command Jasmine exerted, the polished floors, reflective surfaces, and arranged displays, all silently emphasizing the poised assertion of influence. The showroom held its collective breath, the air thick with anticipation, every individual acutely aware that the next moment would bring a definitive shift, confirming that Jasmine's composed authority had reshaped the dynamic entirely, and that the transformation of the space and its social hierarchy was poised to culminate in a decisive, undeniable revelation. Jasmine Carter straightened, her presence filling the showroom as if the space itself had shifted in alignment with her calm authority, her gaze locking with Ethan White, who now hesitated, the certainty he had relied upon wavering as he realized that the dynamic had changed irreversibly. Customers leaned forward, some discreetly raising their phones, capturing the unfolding scene in real time, while others exchanged whispered observations, sensing the gravity of the moment without needing any explanation. Jasmine's eyes scanned each person in the room, staff and patrons alike, absorbing subtle reactions, the slight shifts in posture, the nervous movements, and the quiet murmurs, turning each observation into a silent assertion of control. Memories of past dismissals, times when she had been underestimated or overlooked, flashed through her mind, yet each recollection only sharpened her focus, transforming frustration into measured patience and strategic presence. She approached a central display of hand-finished walnut desks, her fingers lightly brushing the polished surface, each movement deliberate, conveying ownership and quiet dominance without a word. Ethan's expression flickered, doubt and unease creeping into his posture as he watched Jasmine's calm composure, the staff's subtle shifts reflecting their awareness that authority had quietly but decisively realigned. Jasmine allowed a brief pause, letting the weight of anticipation settle across the showroom, the soft hum of the air conditioning and the reflective gleam of glass amplifying the charged atmosphere, as if the room itself recognized the silent command she projected. Her assistant, positioned unobtrusively in the back, began executing verification protocols, confirming ownership and authority in a seamless rhythm that supported Jasmine's presence, each digital confirmation quietly reinforcing the tangible influence she wielded. The murmurs among customers grew, a mix of awe and curiosity, as the tension reached a point where silence spoke louder than any confrontation could, the polished furniture now serving as both stage and witness to the assertion of calm mastery. Jasmine's gaze returned to Ethan for a fleeting moment, steady and unblinking, conveying a clear and precise message. The shift in authority was complete, measured, and undeniable. Every subtle gesture, each intentional step, and every quiet pause worked in harmony to convey an unspoken narrative of control, turning anticipation into recognition, leaving all in the showroom aware that the next moments would fully reveal the extent of her power and that the unfolding sequence of influence and verification would soon culminate in a transformation of the space and its social hierarchy that was impossible to contest. Jasmine Carter stepped forward, the subtle click of her shoes echoing in the quiet showroom, drawing every gaze toward her as if gravity itself had shifted to align with her presence. Ethan White's eyes narrowed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, while his hands hovered, uncertain, as he attempted to regain a sense of control that had already begun to slip. Customers leaned closer, some raising their phones to capture the moment, others simply observing in stunned silence, the the soft murmur of whispered speculation filling the spaces between the gleaming displays of luxury furniture. Jasmine's attention moved with precision, scanning the staff and patrons, noting every micro-expression, every subtle adjustment of posture, every tiny glance that revealed hesitation or acknowledgement, transforming the room into a network of observation she quietly controlled. Memories surfaced briefly of being underestimated in previous showrooms, of having her expertise questioned solely because of appearance, of doors closed without reason, each recollection reinforcing the calm authority she now embodied, a presence that did not require volume but demanded recognition. She moved deliberately toward a central display of hand-polished walnut dining tables, her fingers lightly brushing the smooth finish, the motion simple yet commanding, establishing a clear yet unspoken boundary within the space. Ethan's attempt to assert authority faltered as the subtle collective awareness of the staff and patrons shifted, the air thick with anticipation, a silent acknowledgement of Jasmine's poised control. Her assistant, discreetly positioned, executed verification and confirmation processes with quiet efficiency, the notifications reinforcing the legitimacy of Jasmine's authority in real time, harmonizing with the physical presence she maintained. The murmurs among customers grew, curiosity and admiration intertwining, their eyes following each precise movement, their attention held captive by the unspoken narrative of power unfolding. Jasmine allowed a measured pause, letting the tension linger and amplify, every breath and glance reinforcing her silent command. The showroom transformed from a simple commercial space into a stage for quiet mastery and deliberate influence. She met Ethan's gaze briefly, unblinking, a calm intensity that communicated unequivocally that the authority had shifted, that the assumptions of the past were no longer valid, and that the room was aligned with her measured presence. Each small gesture, every deliberate step, and every controlled motion contributed to a crescendo of awareness. The reflective surfaces of glass and polished wood amplifying the effect, drawing the attention of everyone present toward the impending revelation, the room poised on the brink of transformation. Jasmine's calculated movements, reinforced by the silent activation of systems and protocols, created a harmony of presence and verification, a clear, undeniable assertion of ownership that set the stage for the decisive moments to come, leaving all in the showroom fully conscious of the shift in power and the imminence of a revelation that would redefine the dynamics of control and authority within the space. Jasmine Carter took a deep, steadying breath, the subtle movement commanding attention without a single word, her eyes sweeping across the showroom as if measuring the energy in every corner and the reactions of each staff member and customer. Ethan White's attempt at composure faltered further, his gestures becoming hesitant, words clipped and uncertain. As he realized the shift in the room was no longer reversible, the authority quietly but unmistakably consolidated around Jasmine. Customers leaned in, phones held ready, capturing every precise movement, every slight nod or subtle gesture that conveyed control without confrontation, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Jasmine's mind traced the patterns of past underestimation and dismissal, recalling every moment when her expertise had been questioned or her presence overlooked, converting the memory into deliberate, calculated calm that now defined her every motion. She approached the central display of handcrafted cherry wood dining tables, her fingers lightly resting on the polished surface, drawing attention to her presence without needing to speak, signaling ownership and command. The staff shifted uneasily, glancing between Ethan and Jasmine, sensing the redefined hierarchy, a quiet acknowledgement of the authority now unmistakably in her hands. Her assistant, positioned unobtrusively, continued executing verification processes, confirming ownership and legitimacy with subtle efficiency, the system's quiet confirmations reinforcing Jasmine's presence and providing a structural backdrop to her calm dominance. Murmurs from the customers rose, soft but insistent, a mixture of curiosity and awe, their attention fully engaged. The showroom transformed from a space of luxury furnishings into a stage for deliberate, measured authority. Jasmine paused briefly, letting the moment linger, the weight of expectation and observation amplifying the quiet power she embodied. Each breath, each step, each glance contributing to the undeniable assertion of control. Ethan's eyes flickered, a faint acknowledgement of the shift passing over his expression, the staff recognizing the inevitability of Jasmine's poised command. She allowed a calculated pause, her gaze moving deliberately from one end of the showroom to the other, noting every small movement, every subtle expression, every whisper, reinforcing the narrative of quiet mastery that had become palpable to everyone present. The polished surfaces, reflective glass, and carefully arranged displays amplified the visual impression of her calm, measured authority, the space itself seeming to align with her presence. Every small gesture, every deliberate step, and every intentional pause communicated ownership and command, transforming anticipation into recognition. The showroom suspended in a collective awareness that the revelation Jasmine had orchestrated was about to reach its full, decisive moment, leaving every person present fully conscious that control, influence, and authority had been quietly but irrevocably claimed. Jasmine Carter lifted her head, eyes steady, as the room seemed to collectively inhale, every customer and staff member aware that a decisive moment had arrived. Ethan White froze mid-gesture, the weight of realization settling across his shoulders as the subtle confirmations and alerts cascading from Jasmine's assistant completed the proof of ownership she had silently asserted. The polished surfaces of the showroom reflected the ambient light, highlighting the contrast between the flustered posture of the staff and the calm, unwavering presence Jasmine embodied, her movements deliberate and measured, each step reinforcing authority without uttering a single word. A low murmur spread among the customers, a mixture of awe and recognition, as the realization sank in. This woman had quietly claimed control over the space they had assumed was regulated by the staff alone. Jasmine's gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Ethan, who now seemed diminished not by confrontation but by the undeniable clarity of her presence, the proof of influence conveyed without spectacle, just through calm command and measured action. The assistant stepped closer, passing discreet instructions that finalized the verification process, locking the systems and confirming Jasmine's ownership and control, each subtle confirmation echoing like a quiet drumbeat reinforcing her position. The customers leaned forward, some whispering, others holding their breath, their phones capturing the transformation from tension to the silent triumph of authority fully established. Jasmine moved toward a display of handcrafted cabinets, her fingers grazing the polished edges, a subtle yet powerful statement of possession and command, drawing attention not through volume but through poised, deliberate presence. Ethan's posture slumped slightly, the futile attempts at assertion replaced by a recognition that the room no longer operated under his perception of control, and the staff, too, adjusted their stance, an unspoken acknowledgement that the hierarchy had been quietly but irrevocably altered. Each subtle gesture of Jasmine, each deliberate glance, each measured step, created a visual and psychological framework that conveyed mastery to everyone present. The showroom now a stage for the demonstration of composed, undeniable authority. The murmurs of admiration and astonishment rose, soft yet insistent, reinforcing the gravity of the moment as Jasmine paused briefly, letting the tension settle and the reality of her influence crystallize in the minds of everyone watching. The air was thick with anticipation and recognition, a charged stillness that spoke louder than words, leaving the customers, staff, and Ethan White aware that they were witnesses to the completion of a quiet but absolute assertion of power. Jasmine's lips curved in a subtle, almost imperceptible smile, signaling that the sequence of observation, verification, and deliberate action had culminated in a transformation of authority, the showroom now aligned with her presence, and the anticipation lingering among the onlookers suggested that this moment of poised, silent triumph would resonate far beyond the polished floors and handcrafted displays, leaving everyone present with the undeniable awareness that control, influence, and recognition had been fully and irrevocably established.